Welcome, everybody, to episode 2 of From Prison to Pastor. And I'm with Rich. Gosh, say your last name for me.
Gianzero.
Gianzero. I said it wrong last time, and he did not correct me. I was like, Rich, you got to tell me when I do stuff wrong. And anyway, we are at episode 2. If you missed episode 1, go back and watch it. It's fascinating. Rich's life is incredible, and it has helped him to be this very wise human being. And he's dedicated his life to being nonviolent and to work on social justice causes. And I'm just really thankful that I met him through our co-founder, Dr. Tim Peck, or my co-founder, Dr. Tim Peck. And I'm just really thankful. And today we're going to pick up where we left off 2 weeks ago, where we're going to continue what his life was in prison. Rich entered a maximum security prison at age 17 after being convicted of a violent crime at age 16, where he spent over 14 years. And the things that happened to him while in prison really helped shape who he is today. And now he's just so brave. You're just so brave about calling out wrong, calling out what we should do. And I'm really looking forward to diving deep into the next chapter of your life. So how are you doing this morning, Rich?
I'm good. Glad to be here. As you know, I've been busy. So I'm pastoring, of course, Resurrection Lutheran Church in Madison, and then getting ready to take the role of serving as the executive director of the Kentucky Council of Churches. So I'm trying not to do that work before I formally start in January, but it's a little bit hard. There's a lot of energy, so I have been dipping my toes in the water. So
that's really exciting. I just love the idea of uniting with different branches of churches on the common goal of community, of fellowship, of working together, even when we don't agree on every single little thing. Let's just put people first and what would benefit everybody. I think that's really beautiful, and I think that's very cool and smart of Kentucky to put you in charge of that soon. And did you deliver a speech yesterday? Is that why we didn't have it on Monday?
I was down at with the Poor People's Campaign and Repairs the Breach for their Moral Monday, first Moral Monday. There's folks in, I think, 16 to 20 states working with Bishop William Barber and his group, Repairs of the Breach, Poor People's Campaign. So I was asked to provide some reflection on the prophet Amos and Isaiah's words about, unjust laws and the ideas of justice and righteousness. So that was actually my first time down at the Capitol Annex building. So I had been to Frankfurt before, but it was my first time down there. So yeah,
I've never been to Frankfurt. Like, people don't even realize that's Kentucky's capital. People think it's Louisville, which is close to where we live. But yeah, right. That's interesting. So yeah, you can see that. So Poor People's Campaign, is that on Facebook? Can we follow it?
Yeah, so Poor People's Campaign is a great organization. I encourage people to check them out. You can just Google in Poor People's Campaign or Repairers of the Breach, but just go to Poor People's Campaign and Google. It's a national organization focused on moral revival and what they refer to as the third reconstruction in America. So it's really focused. So some people may know, or I don't know what people may know actually. So rewind that. But before he was assassinated, Martin Luther King was starting something called Moving Toward a Poor People's Campaign, right?
Oh, I didn't know that.
Trying to bring people, draw the connections between poor and working class white people and other people in general together with the civil rights movement for human rights, not just civil rights. So it was a shift. We had to bring a King scholar in or somebody to talk some more about that. But that is where I believe Bishop William Barber took that name from, and it was birthed out of some movements in North Carolina. So yes, I was speaking there.
I'm always appalled that we're the richest, most powerful country in the world, and that there are so many people suffering. And there's like legit trillionaire. We have a trillionaire now. We have companies worth $1 trillion, and we have people starving and they can't afford to be housed. And it just seems like we could be doing this better. We could be distributing wealth better. We could have a moral obligation to take care of those that are suffering, instead of what we seem to be doing, where we're doing the blame game, where we're like, well, it's your fault, you're poor. And it's like, well, we've all made mistakes, but you know, just human decency. But even if you don't have that, it's actually safer to live in a community where everybody is cared for. There's less crime. So even if you don't have the humanity moral element, it's helps you and your family stay safer by keeping others safer. So I'm thankful for the work you're doing, and I'm glad you're using it in the name of being a Lutheran pastor, because I feel like we're losing that a little bit if we kind of step back and view people as other, and we don't realize we're all human and we should help each other out. I just like to call that out. So I appreciate the work that you're doing. So thanks for doing that. And that group sounds fantastic. Okay, let's get into, let's go back in time to the, I'm sure not your most favorite time in your life, the over 14 years you spent in a maximum security prison in New York. And you talked at the end of episode 1 getting into hospice work. So it was a pastor that you're close with now that helped you, and a group of other men and teenage young men get into this group where you would help people in prison not die alone, and how that work helped shape who you are today and what you did when you got out of prison. So can you take us back there and kind of explain the things that we didn't get to last time?
Sure. So yeah, a chaplain was brought into New York State, in the prison I was at in Coxsackie, New York. And I had mentioned before that he is and was a clinical supervisor, so helped train chaplains and pastors. Of course, in that space, I didn't know what any of that meant, or even know that that was a thing. So I'd emphasize that we were handpicked in a certain way and trained. We went through some initial training and then ongoing weekly support, which is a common clinical model in clinical pastoral education anyway. So we didn't know that's what we were participating in, but that is what we were participating in. And we were working with a commitment that no one should die alone. So I mentioned that in the early 90s, 1990s, that of course the prison populations were exploding across the states and in the federal prison system due to a number of different things: tough on crime rhetoric and laws, kind of a bipartisan coalition of people wanting to be tough on crime.
It seemed to be a very popular political issue to run on, to get elected, that you were going to be tough on crime.
Yep, absolutely. So we could talk about the politics of that, and maybe we should at some point, but let's just say that rhetoric intentionally targeted in our country, particularly Black people. And it's important to note that. So because of the increase in the prison population and more mandatory minimum sentences, which means if a person had more than 2 or 3 offenses, particularly drug offenses, that they would, in New York, tag a life sentence on the back of their sentence. So, or a life expiration, if you will, on the back of their sentence. So there were men who were in prison 1 year to life, 3.5 years to life, 25 years to life, whatever. So more people were dying in prison, period. So medical units were built onto several maximum security prisons that essentially served as secure nursing home or prison nursing home type acute and chronic long-term care facilities inside.
You're saying there's all these people that are older that need care.
Well, not older. In prison. I want to be careful about, it wasn't an age thing. Uh-huh. We did have men that were in prison since a couple of the 1950s and the 1960s and 70s. But it wasn't just folks with dying of old age, right? That we also had people who had any kind of developed cancer along the way, or hepatitis C or whatever, HIV disease, anything that a person anywhere could die from. People would die from in prison, and sometimes the prison environment or the rougher lives that people had lived prior to being in prison would make those diseases more intense.
Yeah, I would say a prison life is not the healthiest lifestyle. You're probably not getting the healthiest food. Your mental health is suffering. Yeah, it makes sense. Okay, so there's
Yeah,
all kinds of magnified reasons why people might be in hospice, not necessarily they're older.
right. That's right. But certainly the older folks were someone who were people who it was heartbreaking. And because as a prisoner, I'm sitting there looking at them, and those of us who did the work were looking at these men, and like, this could be us, or
Oh yeah.
this is us in a certain way, right?
Hmm.
So I'll tell you just one quick story, that I'll talk a little bit about how I ended up working in hospice in Denver, Colorado. So we started working with this older fella, and he'd been in prison for many, many years. And let me stop and just say again that I have all these men's names written down because it was important to me to hold their names, and I carry them in my stack of journal books from that time over 20 years ago, 24 years ago, 25 years ago. Um, but this is an older black man who'd been in prison for many, many, many years, and had an understandable, as most of us in prison did, if not all of us, distrust of the system and the correctional officers, any staff in the prison, right? And came in to do my shifts with him, and he wanted to learn Spanish, so I would lift his legs up when we were doing our little mobilization exercises, and I would help him count in Spanish, uno, dos, tres, and stuff. Human touch can't be underestimated in anywhere in the world, but particularly you think about among men, and then
Yes.
men in prison, right?
Yes.
The idea of
Yes.
touch is not safe, or socially it's suspicious.
And it's a basic human need that we all have.
Yeah,
To be touched, to be loved, to be hugged. Yeah. So that just makes my heart break imagining.
So
Yeah.
I know viewers of the show like sometimes we like kind of dramatic stories, and so, but this was also a life-changing situation for me, because one of the things that we were not supposed to do is actually help them with bathroom stuff, right? Like, that's the job of the civilian nurse aides and stuff like that. But a lot of these guys were like, we want our own to take care of us. And so this old man was in his in a little area, the toilet area, and I'm basically locked in the room with him, and he yells out to me, hey, Richie, get in here, and I'm like, come on, man. In back of my mind, I'm like, come on, man. I'm not trying to go.
You don't want to do that.
Where you just well, I don't know I don't know what he's gonna ask me. So yeah, went in there, and he was like, I need you to wipe my bottom. He didn't use those words, but he said, I need you to wipe my ass. And so I just did it. I said, okay. And put gloves on, handled business, and we were not really supposed to feed them either. But over time, we talked a little bit about the correction officers who were against us, how we kind of converted them over time. People mostly looked the other way because they were like, for whatever reasons, well, nobody really wants to do those kind of jobs, but we were able to do this, help them get a drink or eat applesauce or whatever, or help them, clean up after using the bathroom, because we were them and they were us. And so there was something incredibly humbling about that, to be trusted and to be willing to do that. There's a song in the Christian tradition that goes something like this. It says, "Will you let me be your servant?" And then it says, "Pray that I might have the grace to let you be my servant too." Or the time before Jesus' crucifixion, where Jesus says, "Well, I'm going to wash your feet now." And Peter's like, "No way. You can't do that." Sometimes we need the grace in our lives to allow other people to help us.
And to realize that it helps the person that cares about us too. That it helps. Yeah. When you help somebody, it helps you. And we need to remember that it's okay to ask for help. It's okay to be a little humble and say, I need this and this right now. And to be able to accept it, it will help the relationship of whoever you're asking.
Sometimes I need help and I don't even know I need help.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe somebody else can perceive that and
Mm-hmm.
come alongside. And if I'm resistant to that, uh, then I'm in some church tradition. People would say, "Well, you're robbing that person of their blessing." But the reality is that person's not just blessed in their helping. There's a humility and a growth opportunity to when I'm willing to accept others' help. So let's bridge this a little bit different way and kind of more put some meat on this, if so to speak. So I was writing about the experiences of being a prison hospice aide, right? And my pastor Jay Lewis, again, I mentioned him out of Calvary Presbyterian in Newburgh, New York. He required us to journal, and I took this very seriously. And I started sending some copies of things I was writing to my mother, who ended up working for a hospice company in Denver. And she shared some of this stuff with the CEO of that company, who started writing to me. And so this particular woman wrote to me for a couple of years, and she said that if they ever let you out of there, I'm going to hire you at my company. So when I came to parole hearing, and she actually wrote a letter saying that she was going to provide me a job if I got out. So that's all very hopeful. It's also very atypical.
Yeah, very rare in the,
So that
yeah.
very rare. And so what I want to kind of get to is bridge what I'm talking about, letting people help you, and the need for all of us to have helping relationships, right? Um, to the idea of, what happens to people when they come out of prison. We call it collateral consequences. And emphasize here that a lot of what happened to me is not common. I can say I don't really understand all of this, why these things happen to me. Some people will say, well, you've been blessed and all that. And I think, well, that's a lot to be grateful for. But most of my brothers and sisters coming out of prison weren't afforded these seemingly happenstance or circumstantial connections. So this woman,
What you're talking about is so human. Like there's an accident and one person survives and the others do not, and they're like, why me? Someone survives war and some of their friends do not. Why me? This is a very common theme that we do, that is hard. So I imagine you're very grateful, and then I imagine you have some anger inside there of, why aren't we helping everybody else that are coming out of prison?
well, I think I get there over time, right? But I'll say two things. There's a systemic intention on, in a sense, keeping people down. So
Hmm.
let me walk through maybe some progressions, right? So it's not just an innocent mistake or oversight, right, in the system, in the carceral state or the carceral system or the prison system. Okay, it's not just a mistake. Um, there's an intentional, oppression of people who have been in prison. Now, some standardized language would be, well, you did the time, right, and now you should be free, but we're not
Right.
entirely free. So, but let me get there, Sarah. Here,
Hmm.
walk us through some progression here. So, I'm going to be released from prison. I have a promise of a job. My parents, my godmother, and my cousin come to pick me up in New York from Virginia and from Denver, Colorado, right? So that also in itself is uncommon. Okay. At that time, 85% of New York prisoners came from 7 neighborhoods in the state of New York.
Wow.
Okay. So there's intentionally targeting, and this is common in other states expressed in different geographical realities. Okay. So, and it's all code language, by the way. It's important to understand that this is all coded to say Black and brown communities, Black American communities in particular, right? So here I am on my release date, um, and here's my family, right? And I'm walking out the front gate, literally. Then they had sent me some
And
clothes.
how old are you then?
30.
30. Okay.
I had
Wow.
just turned 30. So they sent me some clothes. We call them civilian clothes or street clothes. And here I am in those clothes, walking out, and right next to me are 2 other men. walking out in state issued, prison issued civilian clothes, which are basically prison issued green clothes or beige clothes without the your prisoner number.
Wow.
And so they are each given a bus ticket and I think $40 to get 4 or 5 hours or 6 hours down to New York City, where they're from, and report to parole within 24 hours with almost no family support or no family support, nowhere to go. So this is a big deal because at some point, the vast majority of people in prison are going to be released. But if you can think about what are the things that happen in life over time, your parents die, your wife dies, your kid dies, whatever, your social connections die in and of themselves. So that's really important that I want to point out. So in my case, right, all right, here I am. We're driving down New York City. We're going to hop on a plane and get back to Denver. And I'll just add, just to put a little kind of scary humor here into my situation. The flight was canceled, and I had this order from parole that I had to be reporting to my parole officer in Denver under what's called an interstate compact, where the two states agree that I can be on parole in Colorado. So I called into the parole office in Denver. They said, fine, don't worry about it. We get it. And I'm like, whew, thank goodness. So the next day, so we spent a day down in New York City, and the next day we get on a flight. I'm sitting in the back. My mother's sitting next to me, just staring at me, like almost a surreal moment. She can't believe her son is back, so to speak. And a flight attendant gets on the little phone and says, "Is there a Richard Gianzero here?" So I'm like, oh my God, like I'm headed back on my way back. It was fun, nice while it lasted. But I'm thinking through my head, well, I haven't done anything wrong, And so my dad had the wherewithal to say, well, which one? Which Richard Gianzero? And I forget how he identified it, but it turned out to be that my dad had an electric toothbrush in his luggage, and they wanted to let him know that they went into his luggage. Because and so we're all like, it's funny now, but in the moment,
it had
holy cow!
I was just thinking, like, your emotions of getting out, like relief, fear that you're not going to meet all the requirements and you're going to get put back in. You had to have a lot of anxiety.
Yeah,
you hadn't interacted in the real world. I mean, I just can't imagine what you were thinking.
Well, I've always been somewhat of a stubborn person, for better or worse, too. So I in some way, I was like, well, I've already been there. So if they're shipping me back, I know what to expect. But for my parents, it was terrifying. So, I mean, it's funny in 20 some years of retrospect, but so let's use that as a bridge, right? To get to this other piece. So I end up getting home. Long story short, I end up meeting with the owner of that company and her nursing director, and they
and that's in Colorado?
That's in Denver, yeah. And she says, "Oh, all right, well, I'd like you to start Monday." So I said to her, I said, "Hey, I said, I've been in prison for a long time. I said, could I start in like 2 weeks? Because I just want a chance to breathe." So in fact, I did start 2 weeks later, and a very gracious group of people whom I'm eternally grateful for, and the leadership team of that company welcomed me and kind of, in a sense, shielded me from being targeted because I was in prison. So let's talk a little bit about what this looks like, because my story here and my experiences here they are not the typical, they're not the norm, right?
No, yeah. Normally it's the people that were next to you that got the $40 and the bus ticket with no place to go, and they had to meet their parole officer, and then finding a job. I would think that really hard.
So housing and work.
Housing and work, yeah.
Two biggest things. And let me tell you, men who've done time in prison and get out want to work.
Right.
Want to have a safe place to live. Generally speaking, there are times when you have men who have done 40 years, 35, 50 years in prison. They're like, what am I going to do? Right.
Right.
That's a different conversation. But the vast majority of us are going to be released, really do not want to go back. But you start thinking about the basic things that you need in life. And also, it's significant to say that your people are sent back to the community from whence they were convicted or arrested, right? So you're going back into whatever. And so if you're from those 7 neighborhoods in New York, for example, well, poverty, which we talked about earlier, is a big deal, and an intentionally designed social dynamic in particularly Black communities. This may make some of our white brothers and sisters who listen very uncomfortable, but I would encourage them to learn a little bit about the history
And I
of
encourage you
redlining.
to, instead of being uncomfortable, feel thankful and gratitude. Like right now with everything that's going on, I'm very grateful that I was born in America and I have the color skin I have, and my children have that color skin, because I have friends whose children have brown skin and they're terrified because of ICE and what is actually happening right now. So I try to have gratitude and then try to have empathy, and how can we help? It's not my fault. I didn't make the system that I was born in. But if I could just look at it factually instead of taking it personally, that's my recommendation, because yeah, I get what you're saying.
Yeah, well, there is something people used to think that when the internet got moving and stuff that it was called the information superhighway. You remember that language?
Yep.
Well, that information superhighway is not is littered with much debris, which we call misinformation, right?
Yeah,
But
misinformation,
if
disinformation, yeah.
if I can just go back to my point, though, I agree with what you're saying, but specifically to this, learn something about the history of redlining and how redlining, along with city planning, roads and highways, was used to resegregate under legal and then non-color-based terms, was used to create pockets of inopportunity for particularly Black Americans. You can really,
And so redlining is
well, we'll let
like
people do their homework.
shaping neighborhoods so that it would keep people that were struggling and of different races and religions, it would keep them together and keep them struggling, and it was much harder to move.
Let me stop you. Let me stop
Yeah,
you. Let me stop you. Because there's a very careful kind of correction to what you're saying. It's
Sure.
not neighborhoods that were struggling together. It was to create struggle within the neighborhoods of people who were particularly Black people,
Okay.
right? Because we know in the 20s that many Black communities were thriving economically,
Mm-hmm.
right? You think of the Tulsa Race Massacre, right?
Yep.
The last surviving person of the Tulsa Race Massacre. And if folks don't know what that is, Google it.
Yeah, she just passed away, right? I think she was 111.
So that, or Harlem in New York City, to take it to go up northeast, right? So redlining, right? When federal government it became involved and becomes involved with mortgages and lending, city planning, responding to migration patterns of the United States population or so on. Literally, it comes from they would take red pens or markers or pencils and maps and red line with a red line around areas and neighborhoods. And anything outside of that, they would not sell property to Black families. So people need to do your own homework, right? People.
Yeah, Cory Booker, the senator, he has talked about this redlining and how it affected his family and how they worked really hard to get out of it.
Right.
Yeah.
But so we can't. I just want to point out that the intention here, in the same way that only 3% of African American or Black veterans from World War II were actually approved for the GI Bill and for veterans loans. So this is not about now the narrative. Okay, the political narrative has often been, well, these communities, Black communities, have been isolated because this is what they do, right? That's actually not the case. There's an intentional targeting of Black communities that creates poverty, that creates disenfranchisement. And then if we roll this up to the 1980s and the topic that we're discussing about prison, then you get the tough on crime stuff and the drugs. And now we're in a situation related to this where, because we're seeing the opioid crisis, we're no longer calling people crackheads and just say no. We're saying, oh, we have a mental health crisis, because it's affecting other communities beyond the Black community that was intentionally isolated through legal means. of segregation. Okay. So to tie this in a little bit. So here I am coming out of prison, coming from this community and this environment, and I have a job. My co-defendant, which I've never spoken about on our show, is a Black man, and he later will get out, and he has a job at Walmart. And we're not supposed to talk. Both of us are off parole now, but of course we passed some messages. We weren't.
I didn't know that was in part of the agreement. You're not allowed to talk.
That's correct. A
Wow.
person released from prison is not allowed to speak to anybody else that has a criminal record, or you could be immediately violated from your parole.
I can't even believe that's like legal.
But let me stop for let me progress here. So think about this though. But we're mandated to do some kind of classes or connections with other people in a parole space who are what? Also out of prison.
Right.
So they say, well, that's okay, but you're not supposed to have a connection or conversation with any of them. So there's a lot of problems with this system. It's just
that doesn't make any sense.
It does not make any practical sense.
It seems like you all should meet. It seems like there should be the opposite thing happening. There should be organizations and meetings where you're all helping each other, where you're like, I found this business will hire people. I found this apartment building will help, and this assistance program, that you all should be sharing knowledge of survival.
Well, some of that happens. We can get into some of that. We're highlighting so many things, right, about that generally people just don't know.
Because there's so many problems with this. Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about just what I refer to as, and others have referred to as, collateral consequences, right? So in other words, you do your time, you're supposed to be released, serving time on parole. It's important for people to understand that our current federal law, through Supreme Court decisions, holds that probation and parole are extensions of incarceration. Okay, so you're still under the carceral state. Okay, descriptively, factually, legally, you are still in custody, even in your own parole. So here I am working, and the people's parole officer will show up. We have to sign paperwork that basically waives our rights, some of our rights, like Fourth Amendment rights and 14th Amendment rights to search and seizure and stuff like that. Anytime you're pulled over for, whatever, you going over the speed limit or something, or your license plate, your ID and stuff triggers up in the database system that you are have a rap sheet, which makes a traffic stop very, very
be very scary.
Intentional. Anyway, so there's a lot that happens in that, but I just want to give you a practical example here this morning, and then we'll talk maybe a little bit about voting rights. But so I have an office here. This is again in Denver, Colorado, just across from City Park, and doing my work in the hospice company, talking to people about hospice, various other things. And the receptionist calls to my office and says, "Hey, I think your parole officers in the plural out here, I see their badges and their guns." So they're coming into my place of employment, right, with their badges showing, weapons showing, in a place where we have our doctor, medical director, nurses, social workers, and our work is about caring for the terminally ill. Now, truly, I thank God for that CEO who hired me, and then for her team, which were all some really powerful, strong-willed, and strong-minded Jewish women, almost all of them. And they kind of protected me, so folks knew that who I was and stuff, and so this didn't threaten my employment,
Yeah,
so
because it would intimidate a lot of other places.
And so I want to get there.
Yeah.
I want to get there. Let me get there. So I came up and I said, it's the parole officer and her supervisor. And so immediately, because of my experiences and awareness of law enforcement kind of perceptions, I'm like, oh, I'm the token. I'm the one that the parole officer wants to take the supervisor to show, hey, look how good this guy's doing. It's a terrible thing. Better to be a token than a threat, though, right? So I said, well, you can come to my office. Oh, you have an office? Yeah. So I take them back, and they're kind of bewildered. They leave. But my co-defendant was working at Walmart in the warehouses, moving stuff, and his parole officer shows up, badge and gun, everything. Then he's fired, and he's a black man because his supervisor said, "Hey, we can't have the law enforcement like coming to check on you. It disrupts the workspace." And he's like, "I'm not responsible for that. Like, they're coming." Now, a private business could say to a law enforcement agency, "If you don't have a warrant, we're not allowing you on private property." But we're not trained in society to have.
Yeah, we're not trained in society to say no to law enforcement.
So how
It's
many?
very hard.
So there, he has a job, and this happened to him several times. And there's no reason. There's no reason for them to come to his employment. We're required on parole to submit a copy of all our paychecks to prove that we're on, that we're working. We also are in different states have different ways of doing this. You can be brought in for a drug test or urine test at any time, right?
Wow.
That's just conditions of parole. So they have the mechanisms there to monitor, and you have to go to parole office at whatever time your level of supervision you're on. But it's a very common practice for those of us who are able to get a job in the first place, that then parole shows up at your work. For what? For what? And they threaten your ability to work. So do I think that all those parole officers have ill motives or whatever? I do not think that. But it is a system set up for this kind of exploitation with no consideration. Like, so that's something kind of like I describe as a collateral consequence. So I want you to think about this, right? So you ever been at a job interview too, and then like you give your little resume, right? So, I worked at Walmart for 3 months, 6 months, 1 year. And then, I worked at Target, or I worked at the gas station. And they're like, "Well, how come you didn't stay in ththese places?" Well, my parole officer showed up, and they had their badge and their gun showing, and it freaked people out. So I was terminated. So things, the collateral consequences of the system are stacked, right, to keep people within the carceral state. But what I want to emphasize very clearly is I'm not indicting the individual people who work in the carceral system.
It's the system. We need to change the system.
But the system is designed for people to know their role and to keep former prisoners or parolees in a certain lane.
It would be so easy to change this. It would be so easy to, yes. I mean, it should be, because when prisoners get out, they've done their time. We should set up support for them. We want them working in society. We want them to be able to have that Walmart job and to support that job. It just seems like a few changing of the culture and the rules would.
Well, let me challenge you.
I know what you're saying, that we've set it up to keep them that way, keep them down.
Well, who is the we that wants other people to succeed? You said we.
It should be the community, the collective community as a whole.
But it is not. It is not. Now listen to something else you said, right? Well, we want that person to have that Walmart job. I really don't. What about those who can go on and get a unionized trade?
Yeah, I mean, I'd rather him have like the best job that would fit.
But I get your point. But this is why, in some sense, I've been reluctant in years past to share things about my story, because my story is not typical, right?
No.
I've had a lot of privileges, certainly my skin color, it has not been a deterrent for me. So many times, right, because I am a white person, that people look at my story and they say, "Oh, there's redemption here. There's this," right? But if I was Black, then people would be more suspicious of me. So let's put a pin in this just for a moment, because we bring up, and we need to bring up, in order to understand some of these things. We're talking and dancing around racism and white supremacy, right? We're kind of dancing around this. So I want to say something in the same way that I mentioned the behavior of parole officers, right? Specific parole officers. And I was careful to point out, do I think that parole officer was intending to come into my space, my workspace, to harm me or to get me to lose my job? I don't think that.
Right.
They may have been doing that to my co-defendant because he's Black, but let's say, for the sake of argument, they weren't. They're part of a system. So when we talk about the idea of race and racism and white supremacy, we're also not just talking about individuals, right? We are talking about demographics, and we're talking in our time, in our generation right now, really we're talking about an ideology and a mindset around, what is a normal person or an ideal person, that they have a certain type of ideological mindset that centers or creates whiteness as normal. So it's beyond just skin color. Skin color is like, your credit card. But if you have $5 limit on your credit card and you're trying to charge 10, you're still out 5, right? So colorism related to, which is what Western racism is based on, is physical appearance over which none of us have control.
Right.
I like to be a little skinnier. I'm glad that I have hazel green eyes. You can't really see that on the camera, but I definitely like to be a little bit skinnier and not have arthritis in my foot, right? But we're not really in control of our physical appearance.
Right.
But when we talk about white supremacy and racism, we have to understand that we're talking about a system and demographics of people. We also have to understand that race is not static, never has been in our country. It's a spectrum of colorism and physical features that's changed over time. So I'll make this last point and then I'll let you jump in, because we talk so much here.
We're getting to some deep stuff.
So for example, when my ancestors came to this country back and forth from Italy in the 1920s and 30s, right? They were not considered white.
Wow.
Okay. It's not till after World War II that people of Italian descent or Italian Americans are considered as white. Now, you can simply go back and read this history, right? But we were able to earn our whiteness by proximity to certain value systems, certain mindset and ideology. And one of those mindsets was that, well, at least we're not Black.
Wow.
Or American Indian or Native American or Indigenous. So we're talking about demographics and the systems that is designed, to borrow your word from earlier, to create an other class of people. And so one of the other classes of people is the former prisoner, the felon, the convict, right? And because I don't fit into, I'm not Black, right? The heat isn't as hot on me. So
you saw that you were at
Yeah.
a place of business where women were sticking up for you. They recruited you for this job, so you were safe, whereas others are getting fired for the exact same thing happening to them.
Yeah, exactly. So that's not right.
No, something Dr. Tim Peck, co-founder, he's an ER doctor, said on the show when we did a Dr. Tim show a couple weeks ago, which I found really fascinating, is he said, well, we all do it. We all have the cultural biases in our head. The important thing is that we take the extra few seconds to stop and realize it and then shift our thinking. Because he said, he was using it in the ER, saying, if you have a Black woman saying she's in pain, our cultural biases says, maybe don't trust this person. And you have to realize, oh, no, that's my biases. I got to make sure I don't do that. And you counteract it. And it's so interesting to me, knowing Tim, being close friends with him, I never see him do the judgmental thing. So I act like he just doesn't do it. And he goes, oh, no. He goes, I will think it. He goes, I have to do the extra step to recognize my thinking. And I think if we all just tried to do that a bit more, it would help. And I get sexism a lot because of my role in trying to be a leader in the community.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely.
And sometimes I recognize, oh, I'm sexist. There are things I still have to break down because of just the culture I've grown up in my whole life. So
sometimes as a woman, you can do things against other women because
right.
the society that we're in,
we're supposed to be pitted against each other instead of working together. Yeah.
So let's talk. I want to get into the voting rights piece a little bit, but let me make a comment here. So what I like about what we're trying to do here and what you're doing, right, is you're taking this very personal, individual awareness, right, and saying, hey, my biases, my prejudices, right. At the same time, that's critically important, while at the same time we've talked about the idea of blame and shared responsibility, right? Interconnectedness, right? Together as people. At the same time, those of us who have courage and the honesty, right, to look our own faults squarely in the face,
Hmm.
which is a phrase coming out of W.E. Du Bois in 1912 in a book called Prayers for Black People, giving us the courage and the honesty to look our own faults squarely in the face and never minimize them while they grow. But the systemic or legal structures or societal structures that breed, so to speak, these implicit or inherent kinds of biases or socialized expectations around different groups of people, right? We still have to look at those two as community and society. So you could get Tim to talk about maybe how American medical standards are different actually in different spaces and different medical devices. The outcomes and measurements and algorithms are different for different so-called races of people, even though there is no such thing biologically or scientifically called race.
Right. You're right.
Or
Yeah.
or look at, right, the sentencing practices for people of color versus white people.
I'm going to take a wild guess and say people of color are getting longer sentences
Of
for the
course.
same crimes.
But we also spoke about this subtly, and maybe not too subtly for some folks listening. But remember when we talked about the tough on crime and war on drugs stuff.
Hmm.
So that was specifically targeting, right, Black communities. And I mentioned how
And not targeting the root of the problem, the people.
Well, that's not where I'm going. Hold on.
organizations.
That's
Yeah.
not where I'm going. Though what you're saying is correct. But where I'm going is this: 80s and 90s war on drugs, right? Tough on crime is focused on Black American communities and people. As soon as, right, and people made billions of dollars on the prison industrial complex. If people don't believe that, I mean, I'm sorry, you do need to learn how to read, and not only that, have reading comprehension. And I don't mean that disrespectfully, but where I'm going with this is in our contemporary society with opioid addiction and meth addiction, right, which is mostly the drugs of choice within white poor communities. Now we have shifted the language from those people being predators and evil and wicked to people who are having mental health crises.
Yes.
And we need to have treatment, not incarceration. So that's a systemic and a systematic approach to policing and treatment that is different intentionally for different communities of people based upon their classification by race. So it's a wonderful thing in a treatment process, for example, for a white provider to have the self-awareness to second guess their own decision making, right? Like Tim described or you described. The next step, though, to actually create a will to change is to be honest about the systems that we have in place. So one of the systems that we have in place, as we're getting close, my friend, Sarah, is that for someone like me in the Commonwealth of Kentucky, I cannot vote. Now, there's what I think is some irresponsible reporting in the Commonwealth and around the nation regarding some of these collateral consequences. One of them is employment, housing discrimination. You put on your housing application, I've been convicted of this and that, and you're not allowed to have housing. So where do you go? Second thing, with the war on drugs, here's another collateral consequence, and then I'll move back to the voting piece here in a second. You want to go to college or get some kind of grant money or whatever for a vocational training program, right? So you apply, you fill out your FAFSA, you fill out whatever. Because of the war on drugs and the prison industrial complex, one of the laws that changed is anybody convicted of a drug crime was not eligible for federal financial aid.
Ugh.
And what communities and what people were overly impacted by the war on drugs? Black and brown communities, right? So when I got out of prison, even though I committed a terrible, heinous crime, right? I shot 2 men. We've talked about that. That did not bar me or stop me or prohibit me from filling out a FAFSA and going to college.
Wow.
Now that's another example of systematic and collateral consequences rooted in discrimination and racism. Now
It
we're
seems like their goal is to just get them back in prison.
so the question that we need to as a society, if we are going to create a will to change,
Right.
we need to deal with the same factual basis, which is called honesty, by the way. Realize that propaganda and rhetoric, which suggests there are alternative facts or alternative realities, or that's whatever, that in those things in and of themselves are lies. We need to stop calling things untruths. That's a weird word to me. There's so much
Just call
euphemism.
it out. That's a lie.
That is a lie. That is not true. And we are bound up. Part of what, let me just stop there. We're getting closer to our time, and I know how you and I do. We can chat for a long time, you and I. So let's talk about this voting thing, right?
Right.
So voting is controlled, of course, by the states, and each state gets to decide what they do. In Kentucky, there was a restoration of voting rights for people that had nonviolent offenses.
Okay.
So that's great, right? That's a wonderful thing. But I cannot vote, right?
So nonviolent crime people in Kentucky can vote.
Yeah,
serve time.
Yes. In essence, yes.
Okay.
So we are disenfranchised. There's a million or so people in the United States that cannot vote, but we live in a nation that has told us a story about the Boston Tea Party creating a revolution because no taxation without representation. But those of us who are free have had our voting rights taken away, and we have no representation.
I cannot believe you cannot vote.
Why not? Why can't you believe that? Do you believe it now?
I believe it. I get it. It's just
why can't you
not
believe
fair.
it?
You've served your time. You served your time for your crime. You're dedicated to social justice, to helping people.
Well, stop.
It's like, and
it does.
Yeah,
does any of that really matter though, right? So I'm a respectable, I'm
Right.
an easy person for some people, right? Somebody could make me the poster boy for civically or polite activism, acceptable act. Oh yeah, well, as if do human beings really need to earn the right to participate?
No, they should get to
see
vote.
what we're saying? So
Yes.
you see why I'm reluctant. I've been reluctant and careful when I share my story, right?
But it's important for you to say you and all the other people that serve their time are not getting this
because
right.
it's not about what I may be doing, right? What about a person who's served their time and they got out when they're 65 years old and they're not going to ever be able to work, and maybe they're going to drink themselves to death? Should that person be?
Yes, that person should get to vote.
Right. So it's not it's not respectability advocacy, right?
But it is. I encourage you to say it because.
No, I'm saying it here.
Yeah,
with us.
I'm glad you are, and I'm glad you did the thing yesterday where you spoke about it, because when we fight this, we can win. I saw in Florida, I think it was during the pandemic, they fought to get it on as a ballot initiative, and they voted to allow people that got out of prison in Florida to get to vote. Now, then they added loopholes and provisions to make it harder. And I think it was it's money. I think they tackled on money.
Yeah. And
a fee that people couldn't pay. So it's still difficulties.
Yes. Yeah. There's a political expediency there to exploit vulnerable populations who can't fight for themselves or don't have the same kind of collective means as other groups. You remember what was going on with all the politics, right? Of that. Colorado restored voting rights when I was in Colorado. Once you've completed the entirety of your sentence, okay? But it's an easy target, and again, if these are supposedly rights, and we are supposedly a nation founded on the principle of no taxation without representation. I pay my taxes. Even somebody that doesn't own a home or whatever is still paying sales taxes. So one one argument that I have, and maybe there's a lawyer out there that wants to talk to me, is if we are not allowed to vote, we have no representation, then we should be tax exempt from income, state and federal income tax, because we have no representation to participate in democracy.
If that happened, boy, would that voting rights change.
It would change quickly. So that's not going to happen. That's not going to happen. But here's another thing. We're going into a 2026 election year, right? And so I have some friends of mine who will say to me from time to time, people that I have deep love for and deep respect, who are never in prison either, who might say something like, well, I'm not voting, whatever. And I said, listen, if you're not going to vote for you, vote for me.
Yeah.
And let me just put a disclaimer out there, since we're under the auspices of, the internet and whatever. I am not asking somebody to use my name to vote. I'm just saying, if you're not going to vote for you, then think about me and cast your vote. Cast your vote.
That would make me angry if I didn't have the right to vote and I were speaking to my friends and they're like, it's hopeless, it doesn't matter, I'm not going to do it. I would be like, you know how much I would give to be able to have that right? Like, it would be upsetting.
Yeah, well, and listen, so much of the civil rights movement and civil rights legislation was focused on securing the right to vote in pragmatic, practical terms. Right? I mean, they killed people, burned churches, bombed churches. White Christians bombed Black Christians, right? Killed, lynched people. So they would be intimidated not to fight for the right to vote or even to register. So let's be honest that voting is really important. We've seen
that's why they try so hard to suppress it or stop the vote from so many.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I know we're coming up here on a wrap our time, but we're gonna have a couple friends in 2 weeks, right? Join us for a show to talk about something quite a bit different than we've been talking about. I'm
really excited to get more of your friends, your social justice friends, to hear what they're doing, because we always have to fight this. Things are better than they were 50, 100 years ago, but they can be better. We can keep pushing for more equal rights for everybody to have basic human rights that we should fight for in America, and the most powerful, richest country in the world. I just want to shout out before we get off. We have a store open now. So you can get Project Next merch if you like. It's my friend Elmer Ramos. He has Hey Elmer. So if you go to Hey Elmer /Project Next, you can look. We have all kinds of stuff, all kinds of colors. We've got shirts, hoodies, hats, stickers, mugs, magnets, and they're at good prices. And then a portion of it goes to help keep Project Next up and running. And then you also support this local business in Corden. So it's Hey Elmer /Project Next. And we just started that. So I'd like to thank Elmer. He sent me the link at after midnight a few nights ago. He'd been working really hard. So I just appreciate Elmer for doing that. We will have another episode on today at 1:00 about Do Something, the group Do Something that's putting these civic engagement meetings together where they teach people how to engage with people about politics. How do we talk to them and let them know what's actually going on without tempers, without feelings getting hurt? How do we engage so that we can vote better and get more active in our community? So that's coming up at 1 today. I'm really excited about that. And then we're going to be on again in 2 weeks. And happy Thanksgiving. I'm thankful that we met. I'm thankful we're doing this show. One of the ways I keep my mental health strong is gratitude. Thanksgiving is one of my favorite holidays. I think just constantly realizing how grateful we are can help us get out of the trap of poor me, this one bad thing happened or whatever. Yeah. And so thank you for
tell my friends that Do Something, whoever's on, because I did a kind of I helped do a speech thing over there with them like a couple months ago. They're wonderful.
Oh, neat.
Like super encouraging people. So tell them that over across the river, I say hi, and I know that they know friends of mine over there. They're wonderful people. So.
Yeah, when I talked at the Indivisible meeting, there was a big Venn diagram of Do Something, of you, of life, trying to fight against LifeWise. There's a big Venn diagram of all the things we're trying to fight. So that was really neat. It was like, even though I'd never met these people, it was like we're all friends because we're all working on these social justice causes. Yeah. So that's cool.
Yeah, and man, I was saying this yesterday about a couple reporters interviewed me, right? And I was saying, God, they said, what's your message to the legislators and stuff? I said, stop, fueling culture wars. Stop, like,
Yes.
do something for people. Like truly, right? Like we have in Kentucky, 36% of people in Kentucky are either poor or working class poor.
That's
I'm
so
like,
many.
do something for people.
Yeah.
God, my goodness, use the power that you've been given with some sense of humility and grace. Do the right thing. Help
Yeah.
people out. Stop fueling.
The blame game, well, you did
Oh,
this, well, you
oh,
did this.
well,
It's
it's not only that, just the idea. We have a representative that's trying to push mandated that all state or Commonwealth law enforcement agencies will have to contract with ICE. Like, really? Just do something for people. There's hungry people. Help lift people up. I mean,
I
people
know.
with tremendous power and privileges
This
been
is
given.
going to be in the history books as a terrible time for America. What is
Somebody,
happening with ICE? It is
hope
really awful.
somebody like you and me in 50 years, and hopefully not someone that's done a bad crime in their life, but somebody that cares about the community, people like you and I are trying to have conversation in 50 years is going to come back, or even 10 years or 15 years is going to come back and look at the irresponsibility of our legislative system, the system, right? That just has decentered human beings and people. And as I said at the Capitol, one of the buildings is being renovated, right? And I said, when we're living in a society that those who are called to serve in the government as public leaders, when they're pushing people down and lifting stone up,
Yep.
stone is not life giving. So I don't want to get. We could
It's a good
talk.
way to look at
We
it.
could.
We'll talk more about this next time. I
Bless you.
can't wait to meet your friends in 2 weeks. Happy Thanksgiving. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Please share the show. We're also on a podcast, Apple and Spotify. And you can also sign up on our Substack, Project Next Indiana, to get our shows as emails with the description of them. And you can watch whichever ones you like. So head over to our website, Project Next Indiana. And thank you, everybody. Thank you, Rich. Sorry I got your name wrong last time. You got to let me know. I was spelling it wrong, too, for a little while. Everybody, have a wonderful week. Happy Thanksgiving. And I'll be back at 1. Bye, you guys.